For so long, death was the storyline that we skipped, the episode that we turned off, the dinner table topic that made everyone suddenly change the subject. But I think something's shifting here. From scratch to dying for sex to the pit, stories about illness, loss, care, and connection are showing up with humor and heart and real humanity. They're meeting people where life actually happens. And at Endwell, we've always believed that the stories that we take in shape how we live and how we die. And now we have the data to back that up. In a study that we did with the USC Annenberg Norman Lear Center, people who watched or listened to thoughtful portrayals of serious illness or end-of-life care were far more likely to have real conversations with the people they love about advanced directives, about what matters most, and how they want to be supported. In other words, these storylines aren't just entertainment, right? They move us into action, reflection, and connection. And Katherine LaNasa, my goodness, the pit is just extraordinary. I mean, really, right?
Thank you.
We're so honored to have you.
Thank you.
Nikki Boyer,
Hi.
Dying for Sex, the podcast, the show. Oh my goodness.
Thank
I
you.
love you.
Thank you. I love you.
And Tembi, my dear, from scratch, it's gorgeous, truly. I'm really so honored to have this conversation with you all. So let's talk about how storytelling is changing not only how and what we think about death, but how we live through it. I want to start with what lit the match. And you all told stories that most people would run from, right? The intimate, the messy, the real. And Katherine, I want to start with you. The pit brings illness and family and caregiving into primetime in a way that we rarely see. What pulled you toward a story like this? Was there a moment that you realized, this is not just entertainment, this is going to touch people's real lives?
Yeah, I think one of the things, particularly as it pertains to death and dying, is that I feel like when we see these stories in television, we get to see a 360. So often when we're experiencing them in our own life, we maybe have an agenda or something, a way that we want something to happen, and someone else in our family has another way they want it to happen, or, or things are getting overlooked or whatever. And I like that. I think it's healthy for people to get to see all sides of the story. Like when Mr. Spencer's children, one of them wanted to intubate him against his own wishes, but really just because she wanted to keep him alive, and the way that they dealt with that. I've had experiences in my own life where it's funny. I think the older the children are when their parent dies, the more they're in denial that they're dying. I had, 2 experiences like that. So I really appreciated that. And in the very first audition scene, one Dr. Langdon that I did before I even got on the show, he was saying something like, why doesn't he just get the person out of the room? It was a teenager that had died from a drug overdose, a young college student. He says, then he can actually help somebody. And I said, he is helping somebody. He's helping, these 2 parents that can't admit that their child is dead, that are standing there praying over their own child because they can't admit that he's gone. And the fact that was that was just before I even had the job. I thought that was so interesting. And also the fact that they allowed Dr. Robbie to take these parents through all testing and doing things, even though he knew he was brain dead. He allowed them that process, and it was so compassionate and interesting, that he allowed that. I thought that was really, really cool. And I know this Endwell's a part of the pit, advised on the pit, so I'm sure we all appreciate that.
Yeah, and you all did an incredible job. I mean, my goodness, showing that 360 view of it all. Very realistic, I will say. Tembi, from scratch, asked you to bring your own love and loss and grief to the screen. What helped you say yes to sharing something so deeply personal? And how did you find the courage to trust that your private story could hold space for millions and millions of others?
Thank you for that question. I think my why for saying yes to it being more than the book that I had already written, which I knew was my story, in the way only that I could tell it. When you adapt something for screen, it's going to change. It's a different medium. It's a larger canvas. It's going to reach in a different way. And so I really asked myself, why? But I also knew that I had in this an opportunity to tell a very universal story. From the point of view of the caregiver and the family. And I felt that that was worth whatever it might bring up for me, because in doing that, I might be able to create a show that could do the very thing that I didn't get to have in real life. So it would be healing, which is to say, it was a nurse who helped me get palliative care, not a physician. I actually had to Google it on my phone. I didn't know what palliative care was. And a nurse said, I think you might need this. So I felt that as much as my personal story, and I was serving up my love, my life, my family, I also knew it was kind of everybody's story. And by the time you get to do something on screen, you really are reaching for the universal. In the hopes that you can make change. The hopes that, I remember we all have seen Shirley MacLaine in Terms of Endearment, right? And when she's like in the hospital, get her more morphine, she needs more morphine. That was what I thought that's what it had to look like in a hospital. It just had to look like a parent clenching, screaming for help. And I thought, what if we had something on screen that showed something different?
You did that. Yeah. Oh, Nikki.
Hi.
Hi, honey.
Hi, everybody.
Oh my gosh. Dying for Sex is raw, it's intimate, it's wildly honest, and funny and heartbreaking all at once. And what was the moment that you knew that Molly's story, your best friend, needed to be shared, even knowing how vulnerable it would make you, right? And what told you that the world was ready to receive it?
I don't think anything told me that the world was ready. And is this PG? I don't know.
No, say whatever you want.
I was like, I didn't really give a shit if the world was ready, to be honest. I think what I knew was, because I was in the car with her and she was telling me about what was going on with her. She obviously had her terminal diagnosis. She was dating and exploring with her body. And I just remember thinking, there's something here. We were outside of Trader Joe's on Hazeltine in the Valley trying to find parking. And I said, I think there's a show here and I think it's called Dying for Sex. And she just put her hands on the seat and said, yes, yes. And I could feel her with me right now even. I felt like that something else gave me that permission. Her, obviously, but something else. And I was like a dog with a bone from that moment on. Because it's also easier to tell somebody else's story than it is to tell your own. So I could kind of hide. But it's interesting you brought that vulnerability up. Is that the more I dove into her story, the more I had to crack myself open. And so I think what gave me permission, I think because I couldn't really find a job doing anything else either. Seriously.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I love hearing how these stories came into the world. That's so powerful. And it leads me right into something that I've been thinking about. Even in the hardest moments, each of your projects makes space for light, right? And what I love is how grounded and alive they all feel. They're honest and human and so funny and messy. And they remind us that even in loss, people still reach for connection, for laughter, for something that, feels like taking a deep breath, right? And so I want to talk about that balance. And Katherine, the Pitt walks this wonderful line between heartbreak and humor, especially in the way that the care team, including the nurses, is portrayed. How did you and the creative team think about bringing in those lighter moments without losing the seriousness of the story? And what have you heard from nurses or families that seeing themselves on screen? What feedback have you gotten?
I think the Pitt tries to go for reality. I think at its heart, when I asked John Wells what he wanted, was it like a documentary? And he said, no, a documentary identifies the subject. He said, I want to feel like you're inside it, right? And I think we were just talking, like, this exists in life. I was just telling her I've been a big part of 2 deaths where I was with the person while they were dying for a while and they died. And, when I was telling my grandmother, oh, Minna, you've just been the best grandmother. And then she just gave me this look and she goes, where's Jean? You know what I mean? Like these things, it's just, I have 1,000 of these, like these things happen. They're funny, right? And so, and if we can't, like, I can also remember, it's like, she really wanted to go home, something that you guys advocate when we talk about, right? And, her adult children were so afraid to let her go home. And because she wasn't back to walking, because she'd been hospitalized now for a couple weeks. And anyway, she had to drink this pomegranate juice. I don't know what it was about the pomegranate juice. And I knew my dad was afraid to have her go home. And I just said, I looked at her one day, and my grandmother's really tough. I never told her what to do. And I said, Minnie, you listen to me. You better drink this pomegranate juice if you want to go home, because they say you need it or whatever. Like, get this pomegranate juice down. She goes, Katherine, it's pomegranate. Look it up in Webster's.
Oh my gosh.
This is life. This is real life. And so I think, having been through enough deaths, my own cancer journey, being in the hospital, that this is how it is. And so, like, why not just take those breaths? Otherwise, I think the show would have been too heavy. Mm-hmm. And then, to the second part of the question, I can't tell you how many doctors and nurses have come up to me in real life, friends and neighbors that work in the community, and also people online. They feel so seen, And I was thinking about that. I was thinking about things that I've had to deal with in my own life, that caused me grief or trauma. And, sometimes they when they come up, you get to have a little cry about it, or you have a little, and, tears here healed the soul, right? And so I think that they get to revisit something like the death of a patient someone was telling me about, like when a kid dies in the hospital. It's just a terrible day. And I think they feel, we're showing that they bear this on the regular. And I think that's healing for them to feel seen. And I also think they get to process a little more of their grief when they view the show.
Yeah. Yeah. You've all shown how humor and honesty can live right alongside grief, and how important that is when you're showing it on screen. It really reaches people, right? And I want to shift into something that we see every single year at Endwell, and that is the real life ripple effects of storytelling, right? Endwell's latest research with the Norman Lear Center found that after seeing stories about serious illness, again, people were more likely to talk about their own wishes or reach out for support. Tembi, what sorts of responses have stayed with you from viewers? Has someone shared that your work changed how they think about dying or living?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a gift, and you've reached someone when they take time out of their day to send a message that says, you helped me have a conversation with my dad about what's happening with my mom. You taught me how to help my daughter. I now know what to tell my neighbor. I mean, this is why we do, and why storytelling matters, and why storytelling on the screens matter in such a profound way. Because with the dialogue, in an actual scene, you can literally give language. Mm-hmm. You can spoon feed language to people, that they can then take to their doctors or take to their neighbor or be with their child. And, we really understood that when we were writing from scratch, and we were in the writer's room, and our episode 7 and our episode 8, which are like right in the throes of all the meaty stuff that happens, we were thinking about, I certainly was like, what would I have wanted to hear?
Right.
What didn't I hear? And what did I need to hear? This is our opportunity to say it. And so when I hear back from in the DMs, and send me your DMs because I like them, and the emails, because it's a reminder that we're all in this shared human experience together. And it's the work, storytelling, like the stage, what you're doing here, Shoshana, it is medicine work.
Yeah.
It's medicine work.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
For real.
Yeah. Thanks. And Nikki, you're listeners and viewers form this incredible community around dying for sex. What goes through your mind when you realize that your storytelling might literally shape how people prepare for their own end of life?
It is it's like, I can only explain it because I've felt it when I watched your show.
Oh.
Your show changed me. And there is a moment in your show where the palliative care rep comes in and sits down and has a conversation. And I remember thinking, I don't think I've ever seen this on television.
Yeah.
And so when people reach out to me and say the podcast, and listen, I can't take credit for all of it. I had a team of producers and writers and people that were in the writer's room that were going through cancer and chronic illness, and so many people that came around to help tell this story in a way where it didn't always match the truth, but we knew it was what needed to happen in order to land with the masses, to crack everyone open at the same time, right? And so you make sacrifices, but I don't think I ever thought about what the ripple effect would be, but I am so proud and I feel so good about myself for carrying, and not to make it about me, but carrying the torch of like giving people an example of what things can look like, because I didn't know what it looked like until I went through it. But I think in order for people to give themselves permission, sometimes they have to see a sliver of it somewhere, whether it's in a poem or it's in a painting or it's in a movie. And your show did that for me. And your performance does that for me. And I want to do more of that, because I think if we see it, we give ourselves permission to feel it and think about it. And then it kind of subconsciously becomes one of our tools. And then when we're thrown into it, we're like, oh, I think I know what to say here. And so I just feel my menopause brain doesn't really remember what the question was. But I feel really proud of something.
Yes. Oh my
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. Of course, none of this impact happens unless someone or many someones, right, says yes to telling these stories in the first place. So I'd love to go behind the scenes for a moment, because the courage isn't just in the storytelling, it's in the getting it made, right? And so, Katherine,
Yes.
the Pitt could have easily been seen as too heavy or too real for prime time. Who championed the show early on? And then what conversations, if you know, did you have about authenticity, especially about portraying nurses and family caregivers and the emotional realities of illness that the show just did such an amazing job of?
Well, I don't exactly know who championed the show, because I think it kind of lit fire and got going really quickly. I think HBO wanted to do a show, or Warner's wanted to do another show with John. And John and Noah had gotten so much feedback from doctors and nurses post-COVID. And there was just so much unaddressed stress that doctors and nurses went through and were never really, never really giving any care, never really had any pause. They just kind of kept on going, and the toll that's taken on them. So that and the constant pressure and growing pressure and the growing issues that they face. So I think they really wanted to shine a light on that and to tell it in a new way. But like I suffer from the same thing as Nikki. What was this?
Getting it made.
You answered it, right?
What was the second part?
Conversations about sorry, I'm clearly giving my questions are too long. Authenticity about portraying nurses and family caregivers, and yeah.
Oh wait, I had a really good idea about what was I telling you about right before? What were we talking about? Right?
You're asking me to remember something?
What?
We're also normalizing menopause here today.
Yeah,
so.
what's that?
You're welcome. Okay.
Well, while they remember what they were talking about.
The nurses and what the nurses did versus the doctors.
Oh yes, exactly. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Okay, so that was the part I didn't think about it till I got in. Nikki and I were talking about the palliative care, the hospice nurses. So I studied with real nurses. I went down to county. There was a woman named Kathy Garvin that I studied with. I mean, I just got to shadow her, and she was available to ask questions. We've done some work with the Rape Treatment Center, and anytime I can delve in with a nurse, particularly in their workplace, I will. In Pittsburgh, I I dealt with the nurse there and heard her stories. Not dealt with, but like, we got to know each other, and then we went out and had coffee. And, I heard someone say one time, like a podcaster, and she was like, you never know what you're going to see when you go to the crime scene. And that's how I feel about going to the emergency department. You don't know what you're going to see. You get to see how they actually react to things. And I think portraying a nurse on television accurately is so much about the tone. It's just like the tone of it, the vibe, the way that they are. And I was telling Nikki, I think, it's like 15 years ago when the hospice nurses were with my ex-husband, my son's dad, who I spent a lot of months with when he was dying. And I learned so much from them. It's this kind of compassionate detachment, and it was that steadiness along with deep compassion that I really tried to put into Dana. I knew that that they weren't freaking out, that they could bear a lot, and that it was kind of it feels like it's kind of a calling. I said this, and I'm a little bit of one. I didn't know, but I was like an inadvertent death doula. Like I realized with my ex-husband when he was dying that I was very able to be present for it, and that I wasn't, afraid, and that I wanted to be there, and I considered it an honor. And I learned so much about what that looks like when people are dying, that when my grandmother was dying, I felt of greater use, because I was like, oh, you can leave. Like, you guys can go take a nap. I got this. Like, even when they're hallucinating and really kind of scary stuff's going on. And also, people look really scary when they're dying a lot of times. They look scary. And so, but that calm that they had, I think it gave me a lot of confidence. And I think I definitely used that calm that I learned from the palliative care nurses with the compassion and with the way that they brought in the family. And like a good ones will bring in the family member and explain what's going on. And then it's how helpful and useful and important that is. So I wanted to show a nurse like that.
Yeah. And you really did that. I absolutely love it. And I'm a huge fan of nurses, as everybody knows. Yes. Now, I want to talk about something that sits underneath all of this, and that's vulnerability. Sharing these stories comes with a cost and also a gift. There's something really radical, I think, about turning personal pain into public conversation. Tembi, what did that vulnerability cost you, and what did it give you?
I think the vulnerability cost me. It's interesting because I have a hard time answering the question only because at this stage, looking really at the timeline, I see it as having expanded me.
Yeah.
Because I think what it cost me was this idea that maybe my grief was solo, or I was alone in it. That's kind of how, when I started writing the book, I thought, well, I've been here. I didn't know enough people in my life intimately who had walked quite the same path. So being vulnerable, which was scary, and I was trembling in my boots, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm telling all the stuff. I had to let go of this idea that any of us is really ever alone in this, even if we haven't yet met the person who can help us feel less alone. And so I feel that the vulnerability, ultimately, the thing it's given me is I know the strength, not only of sort of my own heart and the capaciousness of that, but I really know the power of community.
Yeah.
Like, I really know the power of community, because there is no way I could have done any of it, not lived it, not written about it, not rewritten about it, not filmed it, not shared it without community.
Yeah.
And that connection. And talking about, nurses, shout out to Kathy Winteringham, wherever you are. She was our home nurse there at the end. And her steadiness, her fortification to be present made me step up. Like, I was like, oh, she's there. Okay. I don't know how I'm gonna get there, but okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to meet her where she is, because she was holding space at a higher vibration than I knew I was capable of.
Yeah.
And then that allowed me to do that for my daughter.
Yeah.
So the vulnerability is like, it's kind of less like the core ingredient to like do the big, beautiful stuff.
Yes. Nikki, when somebody reaches out to you and says, your story made me feel less alone, which I'm sure you've heard over and over, what does that mean to you? How do you hold that responsibility?
Means everything.
Yeah.
Because I think Molly felt very alone, and I think at times she wanted to share so that she felt less that way, and to know that after she passed, I got to continue to share that with other people, and that they would express to me via DM, because it all goes down in the DM, right? You learn so much about what people are going through, and you realize how universal this is. And I think it means the world to me. And I think there were two stories that just reminded me that it can take different shapes. Like there was a gay couple who were experiencing hospice together. One of the guys was passing away, and they were watching Dying for Sex together in their hospital bed while he was passing, and they took a picture of themselves and sent it to me and said, "We're with you and Molly."
Oh.
And I just thought, I can't believe he let me in on that beautiful moment in his and his husband's life, and that she is now part of that, and somehow I am part of that, and we're all part of that. Like it just reminded me of how beautiful and big this all is, even though it feels so personal at the time and so tiny. It's like, this is my little life. And then there was another gentleman who reached out and said, I'm a truck driver, and I went to listen to Dying for Sex. Not what I expected. You know, right? And then he said, I haven't spoken to my mother in 10 years, and I pulled over the truck and I called her today. Wow. And so the story of Molly's mother and her mending fences, it means everything to me, and I will never, ever tire of hearing those stories. I will be on my deathbed being like, tell me more, tell me more.
So I wanna look forward for a moment, and you've all shown that pop culture isn't just a mirror; it's a map. It shows us who we can be. Katherine, you've helped nurses and families into the spotlight in such. You help bring them into the spotlight in such a grounded way. When you think about stories set in hospitals or around caregiving, what feels important to get right moving forward, and where do you see room for TV and deepening that conversation?
Wow. I do love that people have told me that patients are being more kind to nurses in the emergency department.
Oh, thank you.
Having seen the Pitt, they're like, it's okay, we know what you guys are under. As opposed to like, when am I going to get seen, you know? So sort of understanding that that's not necessarily even the fault of the ED. But what was the other part?
Well, but do you see room for TV and deepening this kind of conversation?
You know, to be honest with you, I think that there's some stuff that's going down, like as it pertains to death, like for instance, when my grandmother was dying, so she spent 30 hours hallucinating, right? And then she's finally stopped hallucinating. But because it's time to take her blood pressure or whatever, they flip on all the lights, you know, and come into the room. And it's like she's 100.5. Oh. You know, this idea that people could have a directive, you know, it's a lot of the End Well mission, you know. We have plans for births now, like how we want our birth to go. We do want an epidural. We don't. We want this. We want that. You know, it'd be really nice if we could sort of start bringing some of that thoughtfulness into the conversation around death, you know, just other things. Like I remember she had to, again, it was like they were going to make her go get her exercise that very same morning. It's like she's, you know, maybe she could rest. I don't know. She's been hallucinating for 30 hours, which is kind of like us having a seizure. You know, it's really intense on the body. So just the fact that there was kind of almost zero thought that we just follow a protocol, and it just didn't, the dying process in the hospital that I was in didn't seem all that patient-centered. Yeah. So I think expanding, some of those conversations.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I'm being told that we have to wrap this conversation, even though I want to keep talking to you guys for keep going. But as we look ahead, I know, let's do a podcast. So as we look ahead, I'm reminded that culture change happens one conversation, one story, one brave person at a time. And if there's one thing that our research keeps showing, it's that stories do what data alone can't. They open us, they move us, they help us live more honestly. I just want to say, Katherine, Nikki, Tembi, thank you for the thought and the care that you bring to your work, and for using your craft to make the unspeakable speakable.
Thank
Grateful.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shoshana.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.